Hi, it's Latsai with TechPB again. I'm going to do my second marker review here on the Bob Long Victory. It is the second generation of the Mark series, for anybody that's unfamiliar with the gun. As most people know, I'm a huge fan of the Bob Long series, anything really, but the Victory and the Mark series is really where my heart lies as far as Bob Long goes. I still like the Intimidator line, don't get me wrong, but the Mark is definitely my favorite of his guns. So I'm going to do basically the same thing I did with the Legend. It's going to be a full strip. And well, it's not going to be completely full strip. There's a couple small pieces in it that I'm not going to take apart just because it takes forever. My other video is 42 minutes on a gun that's easy to maintain. I'm afraid that this thing's going to run really long. So we'll have to see what happens, and I'll get into the gun in just a second. First off, I do not have the stock board. It has a Virtue OLED board in it, and it also has the Violent Products trigger on it. So it's not fully stock here. I do apologize for that, but there's nothing I can really do about it. It's the way it came. Again, it's my wife's gun. I'm going to have to say it again so I don't get smacked like with the Legend. So, not my gun. I actually traded it to her for her Ego 8. And everybody's probably having a heart attack right now, but yes, for her Ego 8, which I then promptly sold. But it got her in a better marker and gave me an excuse to keep a Victory around, so I'm not going to complain too much. A couple things about the Victory before we get started. It does have a toolless bolt removal system, which is, plus above the original Marks. It's macro lineless. It does have an on-off ASA stock. It's it's 4 CI capable, but comes stock with 2 CIs. And since this is actually a first generation, it would not have the wraparound grips like the current generation of Victories and such would. Typically this would come with panel grips. I'm not a huge fan of panel grips, as most people on the forums will already know. I'm not a huge fan of Virtue grips either, but they're at least wraparounds. Panels I'm not a huge fan of, but they're no longer coming stock with panel grips. Now wraparounds, just like on the G6er or G6R. I always call it the G6er. So I mean, that's a big plus. A big concern for a lot of people is the regulator that comes on the Victory. A lot of people seem concerned that it's really short. They don't think that they're going to have anywhere to hang on to. They think that they're going to have fingers coming off the bottom. I don't find that I have that as an issue with the gun. Specifically when you have a barrel on it. I actually should have had a barrel on it for this. But instead of holding directly onto the regulator like you do with a lot of guns, it's just a little bit higher up. And as you can see, it's just enough for my hands. I don't have really small hands particularly. So I mean, I think that it's a good size. It's just big enough, and you'll get used to it. There wasn't really even an adjustment time for me. As soon as the barrel's on there and you're gonna get going, your hand just comes up automatically, and that's just where it sits. I usually, kind of like lock my thumb over the top, and that's the way I go. And it works perfectly for me. I was planning on getting a Magnum Reg when I originally had a Victory, and I found out that it wasn't needed. The shorty reg that's on it, it's fine. I like the look of the shorter reg, to be honest. I think that it gives it a little bit more, maybe an aggressive look to it or whatever. So I like the shorter reg. I love that it doesn't have macro line. I love that it's a toolless bolt disassembly. Most people are going to know that I really like the gun already. That does not mean that I like everything about this gun. There's probably going to be a decent amount of complaints with it, but not everything's perfect. This was my dream gun for a long time, this and the Lux. I've still not owned a Lux, but I've owned, this is the second, once again, I don't own this marker, it's my wife's, but we have had in the house, and I've owned this one for at least 2 days, 2 Victories, and always been happy with them. I had a Dark Mark before this, and a Mark 6 before that, and I was, happy with everything as far as that goes. Yeah, A lot of people think that the Victory is a big upgrade from the other marks, and that it is as far as design, but as far as shot quality and such, it's not actually going to be any better. It's a big misconception. The Victory does not shoot any better than the Generation 1 marks. So I just need to get that out of the way for anybody that's wondering. If they think that they're going to buy a gun that's going to be smoother or quieter or whatever else, it's not going to happen. I traded my original Victory. I traded my Dark Mark IV, and I got it in the mail, and it felt exactly like my Dark Mark did the 3 days before I shipped it off to him. So the only real difference is the Victories originally came stock with proficiency engines. Now they're coming with superchargers and stuff. This engine is not supercharged. I do have a supercharger in the mail, but I will be doing maintenance on the proficiency engine here. It's not going to change anything really, other than there's going to be a couple different colors on it. I'll probably mention those differences, but as far as how you're going to do everything, it's going to be exactly the same. So yeah, I'll get into the marker. First, we'll go with the HPR. Screws right out. This piece here, I don't typically take out or really do anything with. Is it focusing? No, it's not going to focus. Okay, well, this piece right here, I don't touch. I don't know if other people do take that out or what. I don't, and I don't plan to. I never had a problem. Always just leave that thing alone. So that leaves you with your HPR here. First thing you want to do is remove the velocity adjustment screw. Which I believe is this. Of course. If you watch my Legend video, I always grab the wrong key. So get that out of there. Once that's out, it's a straight shot directly to that shim stack and piston. So just push on it with the end of your Allen key. Out it comes. The rest is just a shell. Nothing you need to worry about there. If you were upgrading to a Magnum reg, which I don't think that they actually even use or sell anymore, but if you are going to upgrade to a Magnum, it's also just a hollow shell. This piece is going to come out and just directly slide into your Magnum shell, which will then screw in. So there's no real changes to that. So you have your shim stack here. It has got 8 shims in it. There's not really any reason to remove the shims most of the time. If you're going to do a full breakdown, if that's going to make you feel good, I'm sure you could pop off this O-ring. If I can get it in here. You pop off that O-ring that's right there, and then slide off the shims. I don't do that. I've never ever done it. Never had a problem with it. These shims just really sit here anyway. There's nothing under there that you're going to need to work with, so I just don't. I lightly grease that O-ring that's sitting right there, and I call it a day. Some people use Dow 55 in this thing. I don't. I use Dow 33 exclusively. The only thing that I use Dow 55 on and suggest that you use Dow 55 on is the bolt engine itself. So anyway, clean off the old lube here. I just use a regular microfiber, and once that's rubbed off, I'll be using gun salve. Just get a little tiny drop on there, and then just get that right on that O-ring, and then a little bit on the shims here. So spin around the edge here. Not sure what you can see, but that O-ring is kind of in a bad spot for it, but you just need to kind of get it greased. As this thing moves and as the air moves through it, it kind of distributes it itself. With the rest of that grease just here on the shims on the outside. And this is just so that they don't start binding along the edges of that the shell. There's not really any reason that I'm aware of other than that to actually grease those up. It's just to remove any sort of resistance that there might have been. Inside the regulator, you never know what you might have in it. I usually just wrap my finger in with microfiber, get it in there, give it a couple twists around, and then you got all your debris out. It's nice and good. I take a little tiny bit of grease and just kind of move that around in there too. Again, there's not any real reason other than I want this shim stack to be able to move as fluidly as possible. This piece, the little piston, just wipe it off, and then it has a single O-ring that's on there that also needs to have a little tiny bit of grease on there. You don't need to overdo it, just put a little bit on there and rub it around nice and even. There we go. And then this piece comes on just like that. There's not anything that's going to hold it on, but just going to stick it there. And when that's on, you drop it back in, just like that. And you're in business. Take your little adjustment screw, stick that in, screw it back down. You obviously have to recron with a gun after this. I should have counted my turns. I typically do, but doing the video I didn't really think about it. So there you go. That's that. That's the regulator. It's pretty simple, pretty basic. Nothing that you really need to worry about. We're talking every 10, maybe 15 cases. You might want to go through that and just clear it out. But other than that, it's not going to be too often. If you're doing a full disassembly and stuff, I highly suggest that you just leave that off for now. It's looking pretty dirty, so I'm just going to give it a quick rub off. There we go. And you don't really need grease on this O-ring that's here, but I like to put on a little bit out of superstition. There we go. It does not need to be much. Try to get all the grease off my hands here. Alright, so next part, I guess I'll start pulling apart the body. Actually, no, I'll do the bolt first. To remove your bolt, all it is lift it up and pull it backwards, and the entire assembly comes out. Straight shot through, that's everything all in one piece. Put this aside. So when you have your bolt assembly here, the entire engine, it's a big bolt, or it looks like it's a big bolt, but really the only part that's actually the bolt is this headpiece right here, and then it has a little rammer that is going to come through the entire engine here, which, you know, I'm going to disassemble it so I'll show it off, but it's not a lot of mass that actually moves. It's a massive engine, not a lot of moving mass. So the first thing you want to do is pop off this. You'll see this connection joint here. I'm really new to this camera. I got this camera just today. I don't know if I'm going to manage to get it to focus in here. I'm sorry. But right here is the connection piece. So you have the rammer here with a little quick disconnect. So just pull that off. It snaps right off. There's not anything that you really need to worry about. Now you have this. Everything else is nicely attached. So grab here. It disconnects right there. You just unscrew it. There we go. The rest of this is hollow. You got your little spring, the blast guide, and then this is the rammer here. It is still contained. It is held in by this donut, as well as probably something else in there, which I can't see. So it's not going to come out as it is. You have to remove this back cap here, which I will do shortly. This bolt, like I said, really tiny bolt. The only thing that you need to do with it is it has two O-rings, which you're going to put tri-flow on. Other people say that they use, you know, any other gun oils, made for paintball guns, obviously. I'm sure you could. Air tool oil and such would probably also work. I just always like to stick to tri-flow. Got a nice big thing of it. It's probably going to last longer than any of the markers I've got. So, you know, it's, I think, like $5 and this thing lasts forever. This is the blast guide. You can tell that it's obviously just the stock one that came with the original Victories because it's not red. If you're wondering if you have a supercharged engine, If this blast guide right here is red, you have a supercharged engine. And then also this white section here, called the donut, should also be brown rather than white. This engine is actually damaged. It does not hold air well, and it is due to this donut right here. It's actually the reason that the supercharger engine has been ordered and is on the way. It's made out of Delrin, and somehow there's like a nick on the inside here, and it's really sensitive for sealing and such. So due to that nick, it does not hold air. I would be extremely careful and gentle with this donut whenever you're working on it. When you're lubing it, you do not want to get any lube on there. If you do get lube on there, you want to immediately wipe it off, and make sure that you get that entire outer surface here completely lube free, because it will cause leaks and it will cause problems, because the blast guide just isn't going to seal well on it. Wrong way here. So if it can't make that nice seal right here and pop off easily, then it's not going to go. And if you have any grease that's going to be sitting on that, you're going to be in trouble. So anyway, don't damage that donut and you'll be in good shape. So when you pull this up, when it pops up, there are 2 screws here in the back. Let me get that in closer. 2 screws, one there and one there. And if you want to get to the rammer, you are going to have to take them out. Alright, so pop those off. You're going to want to keep them tight. You don't need to like really, crush them when you're going to put them on, but I definitely suggest that you get them, fairly snug. So don't really torque them down or else you're going to end up with problems, but definitely get them well enough that you know that they're going to help seal air back here. Move those 2 screws and just kind of yank back on it. There we go. So you have got your back plate here and the back of the engine. Mine's a little bit dirty here. So you just push the rammer straight out like that, and as you can see, mine is actually a modified rammer. Come on, focus in here. It's modified. Somebody actually drilled in here and milled out a little section that you could put an O-ring to be a bumper. I don't know why. I don't know if it even helps, but I'm not going to argue with it, and I definitely don't plan on screwing around. Yours will not look like that. Yours should look like just flat metal right there, but just give a heads up that mine has this bumper, not something that you will, most likely you're not going to have to deal with. So on the back here, you have an O-ring. A lot of people miss this O-ring, don't think about it, don't realize it, but right here, around the entire circumference there, is an O-ring. It looks like it's a funny shape, like it would be some sort of specialty good. I don't know offhand what size it is. I could probably size it with the O-ring monkey chart, or you guys could just look it up in the manual. But as you can see, it is just a standard O-ring. When you're putting it in, you just kind of, man, my hands are covered in grease here. You just set it in the top and then press it in. And it goes nice and easy. It seems like it would be a lot worse than it actually is, but you just push it in and it kind of helps itself to take shape. So when you got it all in there, and then it's seated nice, I'm going to clean this thing out. I like to use Q-tips in this area. A lot of the small areas I'll use Q-tips. Simply for the fact that once I start getting the microfiber cloth in there, my fingers are just too large to get into a lot of the areas that you're going to need to get. So Q-tip it out, and once that's done up, Dow 55, again, I suggest Dow 55 heavily. Can you use Dow 33? Yes. There are people that use it with great success, but if you are using Dow 33 and you start to get leaks, it starts to get really inefficient, it starts to have problems, it's because you're using Dow 33. The tolerances are made to where these O-rings are supposed to swell, and that's what the Dow 55 does. It makes these O-rings in the engine swell. Dow 33 does not do that, but with a lot of the guns, it's already good enough to go. It's not going to be any sort of really bad tolerances. So if you use Dow 33, it's usually fine. I still do not suggest it. I would go with Dow 55 anyway. Anyhow, Dow 55, I've got a little bit sucked into my syringe here. I saw a while ago on a a video with Bob Long himself, obviously. He uses a syringe when he's going to do his maintenance on this thing. So when this thing's still attached, like this, rather than actually break off this back part, he just kind of pulls it up and he sticks the syringe in there and he injects Dow 55 directly onto it, pulls out the syringe, and then just kind of works that back and forth. I'm sure it works great. I don't like old lube in my gun. I don't like that there might be any debris in it, so every single time I'm going to break this thing down, I just go fully, and I make sure that it's just completely cleaned off, so that I do not run into issues. So anyway, even if I don't plan to use his method for doing that, it's still nice to get controlled bursts with this. So get in a little bit of Dow 55, which reeks like Windex or some kind of kitchen cleaner or something. I've never figured out what it is that makes that smell, but every single time I'm thinking I'm rubbing my gun down with Windex. So there was that. It doesn't take a lot, just get it nice and covered. This section right here, it has two small O-rings right there, which help to seal, and two on this side, which let air in and out. So as you can see, those two have holes. Those two, come on, focus in. Those two do not. So yeah, they need a little bit as well. They're not really important. I mean, don't get me wrong, every O-ring is important, but it's not something you really need to worry about. You could probably just use residue that you might already have on your hands. You might not even need Dow 55. Even if you're having leak issues, it's probably not coming from these. So I just quickly rub over the top of them, like that, and then get a little bit on the engine. Again, you don't really even need on the engine. I'm a little bit superstitious towards my guns, so I always like to put on a little bit just in case, which is typically what got me in trouble with my old SLGs. On this again, you won't have that back O-ring, as I said, but you will have an O-ring that's right here. It's obviously just what seals the rammer. So you just take the microfiber here, rub it down. If you want to be really thorough, you could technically take a pick, remove it, and then just quickly clean it off, get the trench and everything else, and get that taken care of. But I don't typically worry about that one too much, and I don't worry about problems that might be under the O-rings unless I'm having issues with the gun. This O-ring right here, you can put a decent amount of lube on. Like I said, when I see Bob Long do his, he seems to inject a lot. A lot of other people that I've seen, including Mike, put just a ton on this thing. And really the reason is because it's going to be moving a lot. If you put a lot on there, it's not really going to affect anything. You don't have a huge risk of it blowing into your barrel and stuff and throwing off your accuracy. But at the same time, when you got a bunch on there, it makes it to where it's going to last a lot longer before you have to put in new. So just drop it in, pull it in, move it back and forth. What you want to make sure, if you're trying to, if you're troubleshooting or whatever else, if you put your finger here on the tip and then you pull on here, you should really feel suction. I mean, I'm just barely pulling, and you can really feel the suction on it. If you are not getting that suction and the rammer's pulling through like that, that O-ring is obviously not going to hold anything. So I always just put it on there, put my finger on, and then there we go. It holds there. You can tell because it's going to pop straight back. Makes a nice good vacuum. Stick it on. And then we're going to put this guy back on. When you're putting it on, it has, you got 2 screw holes here, and then 2 just holes there. Those 2 holes here on the top, which is up here with the magnet, those correspond with this, the top section has got 2 little nubs there. So you're going to put those in, just like that. There we go. Magnet's nice and strong on this thing, so it's going to want to pop immediately. Anyway, so you got the magnet up there. Once you got that thing back in, put your 2 screws back in. And you definitely want to get these things tight because you know, it's going to make that seal at the back with that that O-ring that's kind of in this 8 shape. That one that I was showing you, that it's not really a specialty O-ring, it's actually, you know, a regular O-ring that just kind of fits into that slot. You're definitely going to want to make sure that you got a good seal there, or else it's going to leak air like crazy out of the back. So again, you don't want to really mash these things down. Give it a good amount. You know, when you feel it stop, just kind of give it a couple tugs, and that's good. If you really start cranking it, you're going to start stripping screws. You might even crush down the O-ring and cause more problems. So I would not suggest doing that. That entire section's done. Again, this donut, be careful with it. Always make sure that you don't have any lube on it. I have kind of like a color coding system here. I have 2 microfibers, which are my, you know, wet rags. These are the ones that rub oil and everything else off. And then this would be my dry rag. This is what I clean you know, when I'm done, I kind of wipe off all the grease and stuff, fingerprints from, you know, my gloss guns, things that I want to make sure that I don't have grease on. I always have a dry rag. It's something that's really important, if you ask me. I see a lot of guys, you know, they use their wet rag, and they've been doing everything else with the gun, cleaning it out, getting all the shit off, and then they will go to clean this thing off, and they don't realize that they're putting on, you know, that thing could have been dry, and you put on just a thin layer of grease because of something you've already wiped off. So always have an additional rag that you can use to make sure that you're just going to dry off everything. So that section's done. You got the blast guide here. It's got these 2 O-rings here. Come on, focus in. There we go. You got one here, and then one really thin one right there, and then an inner surface O-ring right in there. As most people will know from the forums, I hate inner surface O-rings. It's quite possibly the worst thing that I know that you can have on a gun. There are bits to get to. This one's really small in a really small spot. I find it difficult to pick out. You're basically forced to have an O-ring pick if anything ever goes wrong with that thing. And even getting an O-ring pick in there can be a pain in the ass, because I mean, it's just so small of a hole. So that's something I don't really like, but can't really be avoided. Even worse, it's difficult to lube. If you're going to remove lube, just stick a Q-tip in there. And I like to just kind of go all the way through. And then you get the head kind of halfway out and spin it. Again, that's what she said. As you can see, it's got a fair amount of dirt. I'm going to want to run the other side in there again and make sure I've got everything here. There we go. Still a little bit dirty, but it's not nearly as bad as the other side, so I will leave it at that. For getting on the Dow 55, again, if you're going to use a syringe, that's obviously ideal. It allows you to get it in there fairly well. And what I am going to do Because if you just squirt out just a little tiny bit, man, this thing will not focus. You squeeze out just a little tiny bit, so it's just kind of sticking out at the end. And then you just run it